to episode 302 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 7th of October 2024. I'm Joe, and with me are Graham.
Oh, hello.
Will.
Hello.
And Andy.
Hello.
Yes, great news. We've fired Phelim again. No, he's travelling for work once again. So Andy from Linux Dev Time is joining us. Thanks a lot, Andy.
That's all right. I hope I'll be an adequate Phelim replacement.
What do you think of the cloud and AI?
Terrible. They should all be cancelled. We should go back to 1970.
Right.
Spot on.
Right, well, before we get into the news, just a quick final plug for OggCamp. So that is coming this weekend as you listen to this, the 12th and 13th of October in Manchester. And if you are already planning to go, then there's some blog posts you should check out. The Know Before You Go post, which is just kind of all the details of the event and everything. And also the OggCamp swap shop. So there's going to be a table there where you can swap old electronics and stickers and whatever you want with other people. There are some rules, though. The main one being you have to be willing to take it away if no one will take it. So you can't just dump your old shit, basically. So there's a blog post about that with the rules and everything. And also there's a blog post by Andy Piper, Get Involved at OggCamp, Bring a Talk or Demo. So I'll link all three of those in the show notes. Rumour has it that I might be doing a talk on the main stage as well on Saturday. My Podcasting 101 talk, which is how to get started from wanting to do a podcast to publishing a podcast. And I'm also hosting a panel there as well. So come along, it'll be great fun. Right, let's do some news then. The biggest news over the last couple of weeks surely has to be this WordPress drama. So where do we start with this? A bit of WordPress background, I think, first. So there is WordPress.org, which is where you go and download WordPress if you want to self-host it. Then there's WordPress.com, which is where you can get a hosted version of WordPress. And there is a free version, I think, but if you pay them, you get features like using your own domain and stuff like that. There is another competing service called WP Engine. And the head honcho of WordPress, both .org and .com, Matt Mullenweg, has decided to go to war with WP Engine, and lots of drama has ensued. Now, he is the baddie in all of this, as far as I am concerned. Is anyone going to disagree with that?
No.
Good.
But I can kind of see his point here. They are the main sponsor of the WordPress project. They are the primary contributors, and they have put a lot of money into making WordPress free to everybody. To see a competitor come in and lift your work and then resell it with a little bit of branding confusion so you can't be 100% certain what's going on there and you know who you're buying it from, are they the real WordPress or not? I can see his point, but when it degrades to legal proceedings and counter proceedings, then you think you've probably already lost. It's a bit of a shitty state of affairs.
It is a shit state of affairs. Now, Matt's point here is that WP Engine are contributing about 40 hours a week to the WordPress project versus the nearly 4,000 hours that Automatic, the company behind WordPress.com, is contributing. Now, I think he's well within his rights to call that out and say they're not pulling their weight and they're freeloading and they're this company that's got investors and they're all about profit and they're being bad open source citizens. That would be fine to call them out. And I think that everyone would have been on his side. But he took it too far, didn't he? He basically banned WP Engine customers from getting automatic updates. And I think that's where he crossed the line and became the baddie.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to make money from open source, but they WordPress do seem to have managed to make money from it. And part of their contract that they made with us, the public, is that the source code is free to use by anyone. So whilst I agree that people should be publicly shamed for not contributing, it's also their legal right to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think this is the argument of the spirit of the law and the word of the law, that WP Engines weren't doing anything illegal, let's say, but they weren't really contributing. They weren't really a part of the ecosystem. I think the point at which he crossed the line was where his own employees who didn't agree with what was going on, he offered to pay them 6 months' salary to piss off. That seems like quite mercenary, either you're with me or you're out kind of attitude. That seems worse to me somehow than cutting off a competitor from getting free updates from your site for their service.
That's the thing. He sees it as cutting off a competitor, but he's not. He's cutting off a competitor's customers. And that's the shit thing about it. If it was just a competitor, then, you could argue fair enough. But the poor people who just signed up for WP Engine, wanted their website to work, and then suddenly they were not getting security updates automatically, that was the cross line to me. I think it's sort of fair enough to offer your employees a payoff if they want to leave. And 159 people, which is 8.4% of the company, were like, yeah, all right, I'll have 6 months' money to sit on my ass, look for another job.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty tempting, isn't it? If you have a certain set of skills within WordPress, and WP Engine seems to be doing quite well, you probably get a job offer within a couple of weeks.
Having read quite a lot about this over the last few days, every time I got to WP Engine, in my head, I read that as WordPress Engine. And, they are really kind of dining out on the WP name, aren't they? But that wasn't against the trademark usage until recently, until they updated that to specifically call out WP Engine. And although it is a little bit confusing, it's still a bit of a shit thing to do to go after people for using the trademark for an open source project.
WordPress has been incredibly successful, and they should have seen this coming, and they should have had a more considered strategy for when this happened and when they wanted to do something about it, whatever it happened to be, not this. They've obviously reaped huge rewards from open source, so there are obviously huge benefits for them in the way that they've run the business and kept it so open. And I just think it's kind of naive to expect that somebody out there won't come out and exploit it. We've seen this happen more and more. And I haven't got an alternative strategy, but they've got the resources to think about it ahead of this actually happening and not having such a knee-jerk response. Because I agree with you, Joe. In principle, they're also in a very powerful position, having the ability to deliver updates to their competitors. And in a way, they're kind of cutting their nose off.
Well, WP Engine are capable of running their own repo for the updates, which is what they've been forced to do now. And arguably, they should have been doing that in the first place. And so Automatic should have called them out and said, please host your own repo, but not just cut them off.
Also, I'd have thought that data was valuable to WordPress, however much it may be costing them.
Which plugins are being used and stuff like that.
Yeah, the number of customers they'd got.
And can I just make an old man license nerd point, which is that WordPress is GPL v2. If it was AGPL v3, then anyone who was hosting that and allowing people to use it as a service would have to contribute back source code to the project. I don't know how much of a problem that is in this case, but it definitely seems like a danger for WordPress.
Yeah, they've made their GPL v2 bed and now they have to lie in it. And that amounts to other companies are going to host your software and make money from it.
And there's no obligation on them, but it's also okay for you to say that that's bad and that they should contribute.
Absolutely. Call them out, shame them, and get the internet on your side. Don't do shit like this and get the internet on their side. I mean, I don't want to be on WP Engine's side here. They don't seem like a great company, but Automatic is just coming off as the bad guys here. And I mean, let's face it, it's not guys, plural, is it? It's guy.
Yeah, it would be lovely if we could be spending this time talking about how freeloaders are a bad thing and that we shouldn't pay them money when they're freeloading and not contributing back.
I think we had a very similar conversation when Elastic decided that they'd had enough of Amazon eating their lunch and took their ball home, only to reverse their stance more recently. So this is a relatively common occurrence. I think Ubuntu even got litigious with somebody for using the Ubuntu name when they didn't really have a claim to do so. I can't remember the full story behind that. But it seems to be a bit of a common trait emerging here.
Well, it's old. I mean, even with Trolltech and Qt, the way that they've mixed up their licenses with different parts, things like the profiler for ages was closed source and the updates now not getting the same cadence with the open source version. It's still a big unresolved problem between expectations and business as well as the license.
But I think the real elephant in the room is that WordPress, at least among enthusiasts, is becoming less and less relevant, isn't it? You've got Ghost now, you've got the static site generators like Hugo. It's not cool to use WordPress. It hasn't been for a long time. But then I suppose the kind of people who would use WordPress.com or WP Engine don't really care They just want a website.
Yeah, it's not cool, but it is easy to use, and it's about as GUI as you can get. And there are, I would guess, thousands and thousands of charities and clubs and individuals who are writing a blog about knitting that want to use WordPress because it's straightforward. They've already invested the time and energy in using it. They know how it works, and there's nothing actually wrong with it. It's primarily performance people and nerds like us that care about static sites. So there's a massive market for it still.
And thanks for calling me out as not cool. I'm still keeping my, I think, 20-year-old creaking install of WordPress just about up and running.
But is it running on CentOS 6.2?
Exactly my question. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/LNL. Tailscale is the easiest way to connect devices and services to each other, wherever they are. Everyone these days has a VPN as a sponsor, but Tailscale isn't like those. This isn't about hiding your browsing habits from coffee shop owners, and it's not about watching Netflix in another country. Tailscale is a proper VPN for connecting your devices securely. It's great for companies, and it's great for self-hosters. I use Tailscale to send ZFS snapshots to my parents' house, and I didn't have to open any ports to get it set up. Other late-night Linux family hosts use Tailscale for all sorts, including controlling 3D printers, remoting into relative systems for support, and controlling Home Assistant. Tailscale is zero-trust network access that every organization can use, and with Tailscale's ACL policies, you can securely control access to devices and services with next-gen network access controls. With Tailscale, you can do all sorts, like connect multiple cloud providers together as if they were a flat network, authenticate without authentication using Tailscale app connectors, or send files securely to any node from any node on your Tailnet using Taildrop. Tailscale's personal plan will always be free, so support the show and try Tailscale out for free today. You'll get up to 100 devices and 3 users for free at tailscale.com/LNL with no credit card required. That's tailscale.com/LNL. Let's talk about the critical Linux bug, which turned out to be a few CVEs in cups, the printing system. Now, the anticipation for this was quite something. Everyone was like, oh, there's this 9.9 CVE that's coming, and it affects all Linux systems. And everyone was really hyped for it. And then it was like, okay, it's a reasonably serious problem with cups, and you definitely want to patch it as soon as possible. And there wasn't a patch immediately because it wasn't disclosed properly. But within a few hours, it was patched in the main distros. And in order to trigger this remote code execution, you had to actually start a print job. The only reason that I thought we should talk about this is because of the hype around it. It just struck me as people wanting to kind of make a name for themselves. And it's the whole make a website, call it a name, like Spectre and Meltdown was this huge thing. It just had a lot of main character energy, as the young people say.
We should also give a shout out to Till, even in our Late Night Linux Telegram group, who was putting out the flames as they were sprouting up with links to the internet, at least, by making it clear, as the leader of open printing, that there was only a certain set of conditions where this became a CVE.
In order to exploit it, my understanding is that you need your cups install and UDP port 631 to be open to the internet, or for there to be a bad actor on your local network. Now, I'm totally happy to accept that there would be opportunity for there to be many bad actors on your local network. But the most likely scenario for most people, I think, is that that is not going to happen, and that their computers are behind a NAT or behind a firewall, and that's not a problem. And even if that were a problem and people were able to get through and cause this spurious print job to execute code remotely on or locally to your machine, it would still run as the cups user on the vast majority of desktop distros. And that is a non-privileged user. So the overinflated, let's say 9.9, you can see why the developers and the core projects disagree with this high rating. It is not quite that risky, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because cups is installed on so many machines. So in a kind of good version of this scenario, it would be like a really important bug that someone has reported responsibly and we got it fixed, and hopefully no one's ever exploited it in the wild before it happened. But yeah, the hype does seem unfortunate.
Still, it gave the Register an opportunity to get as many puns as they possibly could about cups in their article.
You know, the real crime here is that they didn't go with the headline "Storm in a Teacups."
But yeah, it does give a lot of people an opportunity to uninstall cups, right? Which is maybe the best thing about it.
Yeah, specifically cups-browsed is what you want rid of. But if you run in a mainstream distribution, it's been patched already, and surely you do your updates all the time automatically. It's that time again.
Drum roll, please.
Halloween is nearly upon us.
Mozilla's massive lapse in judgment causes clash with uBlock Origin developer. So there is a version of uBlock Origin called uBlock Origin Lite, which is Manifest v3 compatible. Now, Manifest v2 extensions are being phased out in Chrome, which means that you can't have proper uBlock Origin. But Manifest v2 extensions are still supported in Firefox. So I don't really understand why uBlock Origin Lite is needed for Firefox, but nevertheless, it was. But then through probably an automated system, it got kicked out of the Firefox browser add-ons store thing. And so Raymond Hill, the developer, started just hosting it himself and on GitHub. And then once Mozilla realized, once there was enough of a backlash and they realized what was going on, they said, "Oh, no, it's fine, you can come back." And he was like, "Nah, I'm not bothered." So that's one Mozilla story. The other is a blog post from Mozilla, Improving Online Advertising Through Product and Infrastructure. This is Laura Chambers, CEO of Mozilla Corporation. And in this post, she goes on about how advertising is necessary and it's better that we do it properly with some sort of anonymity. But everyone, at least on Mastodon, is like, no, hang on, no. You could just not be an advertising company. You could maybe sell something. Now, as someone who produces podcasts with adverts in them, I feel it's a bit hypocritical for me to shit on Mozilla for getting involved in advertising. But people still like to do that, so I suppose you lot have at it.
I was reading this article from Mozilla, and I was thinking to myself, why am I having such a negative reaction to it? Because to some extent, I agree with it. Like, it said something along the lines of advertising is like the engine that drives the internet or something, I don't know. And it's true that loads of good stuff on the internet is available because of money from advertising, including, say, this podcast. But the fact is that I've lost all my trust in Mozilla. So I don't trust them to be the people who are going to make advertising not evil.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know why you can't feel like you can talk about it, Joe, because it's the content that comes first. I hate saying the word content. But the web comes first, you know, and advertising should find a way of working with that web quality comes first approach, and so should Mozilla. Because without one, you don't have the other. And if all we have is advertising, we have absolutely nothing at all apart from the toxic nuclear mess that is so much of the internet now.
Well, I've long since argued that adverts should be related to content and not users.
Yeah, so if Mozilla was saying that, I would be very happy.
Another thing that bothers me, and I'm sorry, Mozilla, but I keep picking on the way that they phrase and write their blog posts and their announcements, because it does piss me off. Like Laura's heading, or whoever's heading is, improving online advertising through product and infrastructure. What does that mean? Also, I have no idea. She doesn't get through to anything before. There's so little to take away from it. And I'm so used to reading that kind of stuff, knowing, oh, here we go. Somebody's trying to hide something behind all of this verbology. And why can't they just be straight? Why do they have to write like that?
Yeah, the Google money's about to run out, so we need to do our own ads. Sorry.
Well, in a way, I'd have more respect for them saying that, yes.
Not to wishing to rake muck more than absolutely necessary. When the old CEO stood down and put a blog post out, if you remember, it was about 2 pages long and contained absolutely nothing of sense whatsoever. It does seem to be a bit of a overly corporate style that they've adopted, and I don't understand why.
I mean, it definitely feels like they're not talking to us anymore, right? I mean,
yeah,
we're not paying them any money, so maybe it's fair enough.
But what if we could pay them money?
There's a thought.
What if it was £5 a month or 50 quid a year, 100 quid a year to have an amazing open source browser? I mean, people would fork it and give it away for free. But look at Ardour. That is trucking along nicely. I can apt install it for nothing if I want on Linux, but if I want to run it on Windows or Mac, I can either fuck around compiling it, which you say is easy, Graham, but you would, or I have to pay them a few quid.
And closer to home for Mozilla, Thunderbird is doing pretty well for donations as well, I think, employing people.
Yeah, except that I think Phelan must have linked this. David Cully on Mastodon. Mozilla bought the excellent Android email app K9, which didn't include any trackers, and integrated trackers as part of Mozilla's rebranding under the Thunderbird name. They even made it opt-out instead of opt-in. And their defense for it is like, well, yeah, it wouldn't be useful if it was opt-in, which we have argued before, actually, I think, on the show that is true. But it does sting a little bit, doesn't it, that they acquired K9 and then put telemetry in it.
Does a bit.
And called it Thunderbird.
But, I mean, a good word for Thunderbird on the desktop is really great. It works really well. It's been getting better since they went into a donation-supported model. I'm really happy with it.
So you're one of these fabled non-webmail users then?
Yeah. I'm a heavy Thunderbird user.
You really are just another failure, aren't you?
I used to use Claws Mail for a long time, but Thunderbird eventually overtook it again as being like the fastest thing to use.
Well, I'm not going to give up on Mozilla. I think that we just have to do this every 2 weeks. We'll just call out their bullshit until they fix it.
I think Mozilla has given up on us.
Probably. Oh, well. There's speculation that there might be a Raspberry Pi 500 on the way soon.
I think it's more than speculation. I think this is kind of a leak, really, that people going through the project code have found references to it. And so it's pretty much a dead cert. The Pi 500, rather the Pi 400, was a Amiga, Atari, Archimedes-like box, all-in-one keyboard computer with all the connectors on the back, classic 1980s form factor, built on a Pi 4. It's a nice form factor. It's quite handy to get out and play with if you've got some projects you want to work on. But I don't really know anybody who uses it as a serious tool. I've got one sat on the shelf and occasionally I blow the dust off it, but rarely. But to know that there's one coming with a Pi 5 inside is pretty good because that's got a lot of horsepower. So maybe this will be a real desktop replacement alternative.
I desperately want a reason to need one of these. I just don't have one, but I think they look so nice. I wish I had a reason to get one.
Yeah, occasionally I dust off my Pi 5, but it's been a while. So I just could not justify buying one of these.
I don't want to be the one to say it, but if anyone has like kids, you could put it in a Commodore 64 shaped box. It'll be perfect for Christmas.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this comes just in time for Christmas, actually. That makes sense. It'll probably come out tomorrow. Okay, this episode is sponsored by 1Password. Imagine your company's security like the quad of a college campus. There are nice brick paths between the buildings. Those are company-owned devices, IT-approved apps, and managed employee identities. And then there are the paths people actually use, the shortcuts worn through the grass that are the actual straightest line from point A to B. Those are unmanaged devices, shadow IT apps, and non-employee identities like contractors. Most security tools only work on those happy brick paths, but a lot of security problems take place on the shortcuts. 1Password Extended Access Management is the first security solution that brings all these unmanaged devices, apps, and identities under your control. It ensures that every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. 1Password Extended Access Management solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. It's security for the way we work today, and it's now generally available to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and in beta for Google Workspace customers. So support the show and check it out at onepassword.com/late-night-linux. That's onepassword.com/late-night-linux. On to a bit of admin then. First of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And you even get some episodes early. And if you want to get in contact, you can email show@latenightlinux.com. Aqara joins Works with Home Assistant. I think you put this in, Will?
Yeah, this is, in my opinion, big news. Aqara are, I think, the biggest producer of domestic-grade Zigbee and Thread and Matter sensors around your home. So temperature sensors, movement sensors, door movement, window breaking, smoke alarms, leak detectors, all of that kind of stuff. Aqara make, in my opinion, the best quality and in most people's opinions, the most reliable devices. They've got about 36 million devices out there in the world. And so they are, a big player in the home automation market. And since Home Assistant revamped their Works with Home Assistant program, this is the first commercial entity to sign up for this new program where they are certifying certain devices to work well with Home Assistant. And they are certifying a motion and light sensor, a door and window sensor, and a smart lock. And so you can buy these devices off the shelf. You can buy in Amazon. In the UK, you can buy them in like DIY stores. You can get them on AliExpress for pretty good competitive price, like less than, I don't know, I'm guessing now, but probably less than 10 quid for a motion sensor. You're guaranteed that it's going to work with Home Assistant. And more excitingly for me, a huge company putting their faith in an open source project in order to help their customers and presumably sell more devices. But this is the way I think that Home Assistant can succeed, is by building these partnerships with commercial entities that people already like and people are already buying their stuff, and knowing that you can recommend them freely to your friends and colleagues so that you can just plug these things in and work. It's really good news for Home Assistant, and I hope that many people will go and buy these devices.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely brilliant. And I was interested to think that it might be a way for the developers of Home Assistant to make some money, but it looks like it's not a money-making scheme, this certification thing. It's purely for the benefit of users. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it's non-profit, so that doesn't mean they're not being charged money. I think there is a fee to be paid. So, somewhere along the line, Home Assistant is getting some money from this, but they're just not making a profit and they're not spending it all on hookers and blow.
So it just seems a really positive, fantastic thing. The only thing I was struck by is they sell smart locks. I might be channeling Phelan here, but I would not let someone unlock my home through the internet.
No, it's a terrible idea, and people that buy those devices are idiots, because you just get a stick, open somebody's letterbox and shout, open the door, whatever your Home Assistant is called. I'm not going to say that word now. And it will do it. Brilliant.
Arch Linux and Valve collaboration. This is a very short post on the Arch mailing list, but it says Valve is generously providing backing for 2 critical projects that will have a huge impact on our distribution, a build service infrastructure and a secure signing enclave. So this is good guy Valve supporting the upstream project for SteamOS. I really want to hate Valve, but they make it very difficult.
This is pure good news.
Oh, come on. We've got to be able to spin some bad news out of this somehow. There's got to be a negative angle.
Oh, it's a proprietary app store.
Ah, there you go. Yeah.
They're using an open source project and they've discussed with that open source project, where do you want our money to go? And now they're giving them the money.
Yeah, the complete opposite of WP Engine. And there was no arm twisting, I assume, going on here. Valve just decided it would be a good idea to support the upstream project that they're relying on.
Because they're thinking long term.
Yeah, this is how open source should work. Well done, Valve.
The fact that it's like an infrastructure budget is really interesting. They're not putting their effort behind offering software developers to projects, especially to a project that is already staffed and already has teams working on things. They're putting their money against capital expenditure projects where I imagine the AWS bill for something like Arch must be enormous. And the correct course of action there is we just want to throw money at the problem, and Valve come along and enable that to happen. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and Morten Linderud, who is an Arch developer, posted, when reading speculations around the Valve and Arch Linux announcement, please realize the supported projects have been picked by Arch developers, not by Valve. We have discussed the need for a signing enclave and proper build service for years. They are supporting our priorities.
Yeah, it's really good. They've not even insisted that those machines get called Valve something or some Steam-related name, or maybe they have internally, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the host names have been specified in the contract.
I'd let them have that.
Yeah.
I would as well. A very quick mention that KDE EV, the non-profit organisation supporting the KDE community and the Kden Live team, are looking for proactive contractors to implement some features in Kden Live. And they've got a couple of positions open, and we'll link to that in the show notes if that sounds like something you want to do. Failing made me say this. Right, well, we'd better get out of here then. Thank you very much for joining us, Andy. It's been great.
It's all right. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back next week when there'll be some discoveries and feedback and stuff. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Graham.
I've been Will.
And I've been Andy.
See you later.